Okay. I took a little long this morning. Okay, I'm going to take a quick moment as we're about to start with the learning sponsors to remind those using Art Scroll
Change your
that be prepared. You've got to switch volumes very soon.
on Mem what?
I don't know. I don't have Art Scroll in front of me, but
I need to know that because I want to get it.
yeah. But
Couple more days.
it'll be this week. That I can
Yeah.
tell you.
It goes up to Mem Aleph.
Okay, it goes up to Mem Aleph. All right, so
Yes.
all right, so Mem Aleph is Tuesday. So after Tuesday, then you need to make sure you're using volume 2.
You
Okay,
know where one can get one here?
Art Scroll.
The best place to get is online.
We'll have to double check
Where
if
do you
there's an
stand
extra
online to get it?
volume.
Huh?
I want to get it. Where do you stand online to get it? Well, there is.
Artscroll.com.
Huh?
Artscroll.com.
No, you say you have to stand online.
Doesn't
Cohen have it?
I don't know. He can order it.
Keep them in stock.
Right, he can order it for you. Okay, learning sponsors, gentlemen. Today is the right? Today is the 14th of the month. Year of learning by the friends of Nina Monester, Nechama Azabad Yitzchak Aharon, many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lezecha Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi, friends of Marcy Kurtz, in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka, Isaac and Evelyn Blachor, in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser. A month of learning by Mark Linder, in memory of his mother, Yonah Bat Zalman Leib, Rabbi Isaac Schmerler, in memory of his wife, Menya Sima Bas Yitzchak Isaac, friends of Marilyn Schmerler, in her memory, Menya Sima Bas Yitzchak Isaac, Gary and Marcia Schrager, in memory of his father, David Ben Yosef, and his mother, Freda Bat Hendel, Marcia Federbush, in memory of her husband, Oriel Pinchas Ben Harav Shimon. We have a week of learning by Shelley and Oscar Mole, in memory of her father, Shlomo Ruvain Ben Binyamin. Today we have a day of learning plus Torah fund by Marcia Federbush, in memory of her mother, Chaya Elka Bat Moshe Akiva. We also have a day of learning by Herb and Judy Jeremias, in memory of his mother, Leah Bat Moshe. And Shamas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafiel Velti Yashir, and we add to the Refuah Shlema, as we've been doing for Peretz Semach Ben Yaakov Yitzchak, and for a young man, Moshe Reuben Ben Sima Tabor.
Forgot to say the whole B'nai Yisrael.
Oh, man, Shamas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafiel Velti Yashir, Shem Atzliah, and the whole B'nai Yisrael, a good Gebenchtja.
Amen.
Has Teddy Spar been away? I haven't seen him.
Yeah.
I think,
Away?
Well,
think-
Marty says he's in Antarctica.
I don't know. I believe they're away. Okay? Where, I'm not sure. All I know is that, well, they have Mishpacha in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, someplace like that. That could be, not at this time of the year, but in the winter, it could be almost as cold as Antarctica.
I went to a wedding there in the winter. It was cold.
Yeah.
The couple was outdoors. We were freezing.
All right. So I'd like to start by going back, as we usually do, a moment, drop to Lamed Chet Amud Beis, 38B4 or B3, whatever it is, okay, on Art School. On the very bottom of the page, we were talking about the question of, is there maturity or adulthood in the grave? Okay, and the Gemara there was saying us, right? There and towards the very bottom, it started Amar Abaye, Ba leha umeta, patur. Okay, that if the rapist had relations with her and she died, he would be exempt from any payment, any knas. Why? Because Abaye darshaned, Shne'amar v'natan la'avi hana'ara v'lo la'avi meita. Okay, you give to the father of the, I'm going to phrase it, living young woman, and not to the father of a deceased young woman. Okay? Now, what happened there? Milta de pshita leila Abaye, something that was seemed easy for Abaye, mibaya leila Rava. This bothered Rava. Okay? Debai Rava, because Rava inquired about the following. Yesh beger bekever or ein beger bekever? Is there any sort of maturity, adolescence, ongoing growth, adult status while in the grave, or is there not? Okay, that was his question. Yesh beger bekever, if we assume that there's a chance of adult growing, reaching adult status in the grave, and this woman who was raped could have had a child before she died, then, says the Gemara, udibina have, then the money wouldn't go to necessarily to her, it would go to her son.
Not to the father, but to
Not to the father, right? Okay. Dilma ein beger bekever, or if we say there is no maturing, adolescence, etc., okay, in the grave, or do we say then the money goes to the father? Okay. Now, I needed to come back to that because Rav is really asking the question, is it at all possible that this young woman could have, before she died, okay, given birth? Now, if we,
Nara.
well, that's where we're going to get, exactly. Baruch shekivanta zev. Okay, we're saying she was a Nara when she got raped. How long is the period of time that we qualify a girl as a Nara?
6 months.
6 months, right? And so therefore, naturally, then we now can understand why the first question on the top of Lamed Tet, today's Gemara is Umima Abra. Is it possible that she could conceive, okay, before she reaches the Bogeret or later stage? In that 6 months, could she possibly give birth? All right, so we have to understand the implication of the question. All right, so now, as we go into today's daf, we see responses to that question. Vahatani Rav Bibi Kame de Rav Nachman. But didn't Rav Bibi before Rav Nachman teaches follows? Shalosh Nashim Mishamshot B'mach. That there are 3 women who are permitted to use a moch, which was a birth control method. It was a cotton absorbent, okay? But it was primarily birth control method, okay? Eluhain, and these are katana, a minor, uberet, a pregnant woman, umanika, and a nursing woman. And the Gemara is now going to clarify why, okay, this view. Namely, katana, shema titaber v'tamut, right? A minor, lest she become pregnant and die. The implication was they were under the understanding there, we're not talking about physiological, okay, but their mental concept was that a minor, okay, were she to become pregnant, could theoretically die from the impact of that, of the whole physical situation, okay? Me'uberet, a pregnant woman, shema ta'aseh ubara sandal, okay? They did not want a pregnant woman to become further pregnant, if I can use that term, or okay, because that could destroy or flatten the existing in the womb embryo in the womb. And those who would choose to look at it can actually see a picture in the Koran of a fish that is called a sandal fish, okay? And it was like what we would call today a flounder, Okay, very flat. Okay, so they have a picture of it there, and that was the parallel. That was the example they were using. All right, so it's not an outlandish.
That you can become pregnant while pregnant? You've heard of that before?
And physiologically, if you look at the Talmudology, I don't remember if he put out something this year, but in the past, I know that he's written on that topic. And since he's a doctor, okay, he is aware of the fact that that theoretically is possible. Okay. Okay. Manika, a nursing mother. Okay. Shema tigmol et bana. Why? Because perhaps it would cause the suffering of the existing nursing child because it would affect her milk, and therefore this child would suffer. Okay. Ve'ezo hi ketana. But notice immediately the Gemara wants to clarify. When you said the ketana could use a moch, what age range are we talking about? Mibat echat esrei shana, from the v'yom echad, from 11 years and 1 day, ad shteim esrei shana v'yom echad, through 12 years and 1 day. Okay, so
12 months.
okay, so
Which
basically,
implies that a 12-year-old could give birth.
so it implies exactly, Ruvain, that it's feasible
It's
to
feasible.
consider that a 12-year-old could be physically mature enough
to
to
give birth.
conceive,
Right.
right? Okay. Now, all right, so what happens? The Gemara continues, Pachot mikan v'yeter alkein. If she's less than 11 years in a day, or if she's more than that, okay,
More than 12.
12 in a day, that's clearly the case. Mishameshet kedarka v'holechet. She has relations as normal, I'm going to translate that, and goes on with her life. Divrei Rabbi Meir, that's the view of Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim Amrim, but the sages say, Echat zo ve'echat zo, mishameshet kedarka v'holechet. The sages apparently say here that regardless of whether she is in that age range of a katana or otherwise, before or after, okay, she
Or
has,
she's a Mubaris or.
all right,
any of the other
or there
categories.
could be even a Na'ara or a Bulgaris, right? Okay, she would have relations on a routine, normal situation, right? Umina shamayim yirachamu, and heaven would have pity or concern for her. Mishum shene'amar shomer pitaim Hashem. That Hashem looks after the simple-minded. Okay, we won't go into, but there could be a whole shiur just on this topic of birth control. Okay, as it is. Okay, a lot has been written on it. I could give you a few books to read if you're interested in the subject. Okay, now what happens? V'chi tema, and if you want to say the ibra kashehi na'ara, that it's possible for her to become pregnant, to conceive when she's a na'ara between 12 and 12 and a half. Okay, so apparently I'm going to say Chazal was aware that at least some of them were of the opinion that that is viable, right? Exactly. Ve'olida kashehi na'ara, and she could give birth then when she was a na'ara. Okay.
In other
Ubeshi,
words, with 6 months later.
right? The
got
implication
pregnant-
is she got
on
pregnant
the
right
fir-
away,
when she was
and
12.
then she would give birth within the 6-month time frame.
so she's
Ubeshi, so the
gone,
Gemara asks, Ubeshita yarche mika yalda? Is it possible that somebody could give birth in 6 months? Now, we've got to keep in mind, remember, that the attitude of Chazal was the fact that they were aware of the fact that premature births, 7th or 8th month, were certainly problematic, okay, and could not always necessarily survive. Okay, so it wasn't just that 9 months was, so to speak, the normal birth period. They were aware that there could be births earlier than 9 months, okay? But nevertheless, the question of survival of that embryo, okay? Vaha'amar Shmuel, and didn't Shmuel say, Ein bein na'arut lebagrut ela shisha chodashim, that the period of time between being a na'ara and a bogeret was basically 6 months. In other words, again, the normal young girl began to show physical signs of maturity on the average at a certain age. Okay? Ela shisha chodashim, so how could she give birth within that 6-month period? Okay, time frame. V'chitema batsir. Okay, hudeleka. Okay, hatfei ika. Okay, so we're saying then, if it were less, okay, that's not the case. Okay, if it were more, that could be possible.
And if he said 6 months, that means the minimum of
Well,
6, but it could be
how is he
longer, so the
defining?
period between Nairus and
Right.
Bagras
How
could
is
be
he
more than 6
defining
months.
that
Right.
6-month period? Ha ella, but rather, what did he say? Kamar, implying that no, generally
It's only 6 months.
6-month period is identified as
No longer, no,
okay,
no
as the
less, no
time
more.
period of na'arut, I'm going to say,
Right.
as opposed to bagrut, okay, being more mature enough, right? Okay, now, elahachi kimabayele. So the Gemara says, rather, this is what the problem was, and this is how he phrased the question and the discussion. Okay, yesh beger bekever upaka av, that there is some sort of maturing going on in the grave, and therefore there's a lapse, okay, or a break, or Art Scroll translates it a little bit differently, okay, than lapse, a limitation, okay, on that the father could receive the payment. Odilma and beger bekever, or perhaps there is no growth, maturing, etc., in the grave. Velo paka'av, and maybe the father does not get a lapse or a limitation or any of being paid the knas.
It's talking about where he raped her while she was a Nara, but the father didn't.
But they didn't come to court
until
and finalize the whole legal case till afterwards.
Right.
That's the point. Okay. Rashi is the one who suggests the court situation,
Right.
if I remember. Okay. Mar barav ashi, baila hahachi. And Mar barav ashi, okay, raised the discussion in the following manner. Mita oseh bagrut, or ein oseh bagrut, teku. Okay. Does death, he'd say in a more theoretical way, he raised the question, does death allow the continuation of any kind of body growth, or does it not? That's the point. Teku, no answer.
Go ahead. Like what you mean, Besden?
Right. In other words, the rape could have occurred. The rape could have occurred during that 6-month period when she was a nara, but they did not but it was not brought to Beis Din to bring a result by the Beis Din as to whether the knas had to be paid to whom till months later. Okay, that's the Rashi's suggestion to understanding what the Gemara is trying to present here. Okay, now we have a further clarification. It says, "Bai mine Rava me Abai." So, given this discussion, okay, if there's a question of, in a sense, we just said her change of status. She was alive, then she died. Okay, now we have another possible change of status. So we understand the flow of the Gemara. What's this change? Rav is asking Abai. Ba aleha v'nit arsa. Let's assume she got raped at a certain time and then afterwards became betrothed, right? Mahu, what's her status? Amarle mikativ. So he said to him, isn't it written, V'natan la'avi hana'ara asher lo arusa? Isn't the pasuk very clearly citing that the money goes to the father where the girl is not betrothed? Okay? Ula ta'amech. And according to your line of reasoning, Abaye, right? Hadatanya. It's already been taught in a Mishnah. Ba'aleha v'niseit. If somebody raped the young woman and afterwards she was married, la'atzma, the money goes to her.
Are we talking about getting married to someone else?
Somebody else.
Somebody else.
Somebody
Not
else.
the rape.
Right? Mikativ v'natan la'avi hana'ara asher lo nesu'ah. And is it written there that the money goes to the father of the girl, okay, who is not married?
It doesn't say that. It
Doesn't
says
say
from
that.
Avi and
It
Nara.
just says
Just
avi and
Nara,
nara.
period.
Okay, period. Hachi hashta. How can you compare? Abai might challenge Rava in answering him. Hatam ho'il ubagrut motzia mirishuta av. Here, in other words, elsewhere we've learned, we know that the status of being a bogeret removes her from the, I'm going to use the word here, authority, instead of reshus as permissibility, okay, of the father. V'nisu'in motzein mirishus av. And marriage removes her from the, again, in quotes, authority of the father, okay? Ma bagrut ba'aleha ubagra le'atzma. And the same way, when she reaches bagrut, more than 12 and a half, okay? And somebody would rape her, and then ubagra, and she's matured, okay? The money would go le'atzma, to her. The payment of the fine by the rapist would go to her, okay? Af nisu'in ba'aleha v'niseit. So likewise, were she to be married and somebody raped her, okay, regarding marriage, and she had been married,
No, she wasn't married.
no, we raped before she was married, but then after being raped, nevertheless she was
got
married, okay?
And
There
then they
too,
came to court.
they went there too, were the courts to decide who would get the money of the fine. The money would go to her, okay? Ela, rather, erusin, but rather with regards to betrothal, mika mafke mirishuta da'av legamre. We ask then in that, so to speak, gray area, I'm going to say, of erusin, is she really totally removed out of the authority of her father? Hatnan, but we're taught elsewhere in a Mishnah. Na'ara ha'me'urasa, aviha uba'ala, mefirin la nidareha. A young woman, in this case, it's not a bogeret even, certainly not, but it's a na'ara who's engaged, who's betrothed. Her father and her fiance, I use that word for the moment, mefirin la nidareha. They have to agree, the two of them, to cancel her vow. So that tells us that an arusa is not necessarily totally removed from the authority of her father, and therefore it's very possible that that payment of the knas might still go to the father in that situation. Okay, so that's
Well,
the,
they could choose to divide it in two,
oh, they
give them both, yeah.
okay, all right, matnitin, all right, a new Mishnah. Hamifat, okay, oh, so I want to just check with somebody who's using Art School. Okay, arts, I was, when I was preparing this, looking it over with Art School, it was still Shabbos, and I couldn't write down the source. Art School cites the source in Baba Kama in a note as to what the 5 items are. Okay, I only remembered them by heart last night. Afterwards, There's Boshet, Pagam, Sa'ar, Ripui, and the fifth one.
Oh,
I said Boshet already.
That's fine.
Boshet,
Nezer.
Nezek. Thank you. Okay. I just, for some reason, it didn't come to me and I was very surprised. I was pleased to see that Artstrol in a note made reference so that if we wanted to look at that source to see what the five were, it was important. I was very dissatisfied, if I can use that term, with Koren's notes, okay, that it did not cite the Mishnah that gave it, but it said if you wanted to look at, you had to go back and look in Rambam and see what the halacha was there. I would have thought it would have been easier just to have cited the Mishnah
right.
in the notes, but okay. So the reason I'm emphasizing this right now is to appreciate the words of the Mishnah. We need to understand again that there were these five items: Boshet, embarrassment; Pagam, that there's some flaw, right? Right. Art Scroll has
She was a virgin before.
right.
She's not.
So
That's a gone.
deduction of her status, so to
Right.
speak. It's Tsar, pain; Ripui, the medical costs; and Nezik with damages.
Right.
Okay. So those are the five. So now that we reviewed that, we can better understand, I think, or at least I felt I could, the Mishnah saying, Hamifateh, one who seduces a woman. And I think we're still talking to some degree about a Na'ara.
Yeah.
Okay? Notain Shlosha Dvarim. He must present, in other words, pay 3 items, 3 out of the 5. Okay? Va'ones, the rapist, Arba'ah, must pay 4 out of the 5. Hamifateh notain Boshet, Upagam, Uknas. What does he pay? Okay, compensation-wise, he pays Boshet, right, the embarrassment; Pagam, the flaw; Uknas, and the penalty for the rape. Mosif olav ones, and we add on to the rapist an additional one more, shnotein et hatza'ar, that he also must pay for tsa'ar, for pain.
Pain.
Okay, pain or suffering, right? Either way. Ma bein onus lemifate. So the Mishnah continues. What then is the difference between a rape situation and a seduction situation? Okay, ha'ones. Okay, first example, the rape. Notenet hatzar. He must pay for pain or suffering. V'hamifateh eino notenet hatzar. And in a seduction, that one does not pay for pain or suffering. We'll see why shortly in the Gemara. Well, we'll see shortly in the Gemara. It's going to address that question. Okay. Ha'ones, the rape, notain miad. He must pay immediately. We assume that means immediately after the court finds him guilty. V'amifateh, the ksheyotzi, and the seducer, when he sends her out. Gemara is going to have
They
to.
both have to marry her, but kushiyotze means when he divorces her.
Well, we're going to get. Okay, we're going to get to that. What does it mean when he puts her out? When he puts her out, we usually use the language of Yotzi when we're talking about a divorce. So does that imply that both the rapist and the seducer have to marry her? Okay, hold on a second, and we're going to deal with that more. Okay, what happens? Ha'ones shoteh ba'atzitzo. The one who did the rape has to drink from his, I'm going to call it a pot, okay, a potsherd, okay? We're going to explain that in more detail in the Gemara too, all right? Va'mifateh, and the one who seduces, imratza lahotzi motzi. If he wants to divorce her, he can divorce her. So there's a clear assumption here on the part of the Mishnah that both the rapist and the seducer must marry her. Okay? All right? Now we're going to get back to that topic.
Are we still assuming which age range?
We're
12 to
assuming
12 and a half.
12, na'ara.
No.
Okay? Okay. Now, I just want to point out that when the Mishnah said, ha'ones noten miyad, Rashi's comment is, la'aviha, to her father, af al pi shekonsa, even though he marries her. So it's very clear here that Rashi certainly reminds us that the Torah's requirement is that the rapist must marry her. Okay, that's important because what Rashi doesn't tell us is that the seducer must marry her. That we have to derive apparently from this language of the Mishnah. Okay,
Did
I
they get
do-
married? Did they get married at 12 and a half?
sure.
Sure.
Do we assume that's with the consent of the girl? I mean,
Of course.
must-
The Gemara is going to get to that too. Gemara is going to get to that too. I don't want to jump too far ahead. Good questions, everybody. Okay, so what happens? Now let's continue with the Mishnah, all right? Because we're going to have a lot to clarify here. Okay, so what happens, says the Gemara? Ketzad, right? Shoter ba'atzitzo. What do we mean, says the Mishnah? We don't even jump to the Gemara yet. What do we mean, says the Mishnah, when it says he has to drink from his pot? All right. Now remember, what might we be referring to here? What kind of pot? Okay.
Would be a figure of speech. Isn't it just figurative? It's a figure of speech.
No.
Why
Okay.
not?
Koren was polite in its explanation, where it said a pot that you would use for plants. Art Scroll was a little bit more suggestive. A urinal.
Oh my.
That's what it was. That's what the Gemara I'm suggesting, and I think Art Scroll is probably more right on in its explanation. It didn't spell it out, but I think that's what it was saying. Because we're going to see, what does it mean? Afilu hi chigeret, even if the woman he raped was lame. Ve'afilu hi suma, even if she's blind. Ve'afilu hi mukat shchin, even if she's got boils all over her body. Okay, he is still required deoraita. That's why I'm saying that Rashi meant very clearly and spelled it out for us that the rape had to be marrying her. Okay, well, let's see. Good question, Sid. Good question. If she's a shote. Okay, good. Let's see if the Gemara addresses that directly or indirectly. Nimse ba davar erva, if there's some sexual issue. In other words, after she married this guy, she was promiscuous, let's say. O she'ina ru'uya lavo b'Yisrael, or that she's not suitable to become married within the Jewish framework. Let's say she's a mamzeret. Okay? Right? I don't know if your Art Scroll, is that what they suggest?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay? A no rashai lekaima, then he's not permitted to maintain her, to keep her as his wife. Shene'emar velo tiel isha, and she shall be for him his wife, namely isha haru'uya lo, a woman who is suitable for him. Coming back to Sid's question, okay? Okay, the question is a shota at the time of the chuppah viable? Okay,
No, the shaila is he raped her when she was a shaper. So she had technically didn't know what was happening.
right.
Well, the Suba didn't know either.
So there's a chuppah is after the action.
Right. So the question is, would they, I would think that we're going to see in a moment further discussion. And I'm going to suggest to you that I think the Gemara will answer your question when it phrases the phrase bida'ata. Okay, Reuven, you like that?
I agree.
Okay. All right, let's go on. Now we get to the Gemara. Okay. All right, now that we've just raised a number of questions, we're going to see the Gemara really does try to address them. Okay. Sar demai. That was the first question. You say that the rapist has to pay for pain and suffering. Isn't there pain and suffering if she's seduced? We could ask the question. Amar Avuha de Shmuel. Says Shmuel, what kind of father of Shmuel, what kind of pain and suffering did she have? Sar shechavta al gabe karka, that he pushed her down and she fell down. Okay, she was slammed against the ground when he raped her. Okay, Matkifla Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera challenges this and says, Eleme ata, if that's the case, chavta al gabe shiraim, hachanami de patur. If he slammed her against silks instead of the ground, are you going to say that's going to make him exempt from paying the ransom, the fine, the monetary fine?
For paying from the Tsar.
Right? The chitema, and if you want to say hachanami here too, the hatanya. Okay, didn't we learn elsewhere in the Braita? Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Rishum Rabbi Shimon, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, Ones eno mishalem et hatzar, mepnei, what? Shesofa lehitztaer tachat ba'ala. Okay, he argued, Rabbi Shimon, in the name of Ben Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Shimon of his father, he should not have to pay pain and suffering, because ultimately she's going to have to go through that likewise when she marries. What? Some pain and suffering because of the breaking of her hymen. Okay? What happens? Amrulo, but they said to him, now notice, by the way, the reaction.
Our scroll says that since he has to marry her, that pain of the rape, she won't feel so much because she's marrying her.
I don't like it.
You can argue with that. But
I don't like it. I don't like it. I like what the Gemara says directly. The Gemara's answer to him was, Eino domen nivalat ba'ones le'nivalat beratzon. Okay, there is a clear difference, says the Gemara, between the fact of rape and versus the fact that she's marrying somebody and has relations with him as a married woman. Very clear. I think, right? Ela rather, Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Avuha. Sa'ar shel pisuk haraglayim. Okay, it's the pain of having to spread her legs apart. Okay, we'll go into that in a moment in more detail. V'chein hu omer, and likewise it was said in this case by one of the prophets, Yechezkel, right? V'tifsachi et ragleich l'chol over. You open your leg, you spread your legs to anyone who passes by. He was condemning Bnei Yisrael for acts of idolatry in that situation, and he was comparing it to that case. Okay, Ihachi mifuta nami, but the Gemara quickly picks up on it. If that's the case, then regarding seduction, shouldn't he also have to pay tsar because she has to open her legs there too? Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Abua says the following: Mashal de mifuta lamaha davar domeh. Okay, if you want to take an example of the seduction situation, what might we compare it to? La'adam she'amar lechavero, to one who said to his neighbor, Karash Shirayan Shali v'hipater, tear my silk, but I'll make you exempt. Okay, so here the Gemara is going to say, hold on a second. You're going to compare it to that. Sheli, she's saying mine, dahavua ninu. No, at the 12 to 12 and a half, she's still a na'ara. Okay, any act that's done to her, injury, things like that, need to go, the money goes to the father. It doesn't get to her directly. Okay, Ella rather, Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Bar Avuha, says as follows: Pikhot, the clever women, shebehen, among women, omrot, this is what they say, mifuta ein la tsar. A woman, when she's seduced, does not necessarily have pain and suffering. Okay, the implication is the understanding of Chazal is that seduction is not totally always against her will. Okay, that's their understanding, right?
The
Okay,
question that she has some enjoyment out of seduction.
that could be a part of it too. Exactly,
But when you say it's not always, I mean, sometimes it is.
could be right, but not always. All right, and it could be right. Okay, so both comments are correct. Right, but the Gemara picks up Vahaka chazinin de itle. But we see that she does have some, if you want to call it, benefit, enjoyment, okay, whatever. Amar Abai. Now, we're going to get 3 examples on 3 different situations where someone says, I have been told that while there could be some discomfort, okay, on the part of the woman, okay, it does, clever women know that they need to prepare themselves physically in advance for that situation. And so the discomfort could be minimal. How minimal? Now the Gemara is going to give us some ideas. Okay? Suggestion number 1. Amar Abaye. He says, Amrali Aim. My mother told me. Remember, we all know that Abaye's mother died in childbirth. He was raised by his uncle who had a nurse, or I don't know if I call a nurse officially, but a nanny take care of him. And he looked to her like she was his mother. Okay? What did he say? The initial act of intercourse, then, what might it be compared to? Kemaya chamimi al reshe de karcha, like warm water on the head, on a bald head. Okay?
Warm water is good, hot water is bad.
All right. What? Okay. Second example, Rabba Amar. What did he say? Amrali bat Rav Chisda. I was told by the daughter of Rav Chisda, and I'm reminding everybody that was his wife. Okay. Ki rivda de kusilta. It's like the cut of a bloodletter's knife. Okay, in other words, remember they used to practice in those days bloodletting. So it's just a momentary item. Rav Papa Amam. Rav Papa Amrali bat Abba Surah. That was his wife. Okay. Ki nechama akusha bechinche. It's like hard bread rubbing against gums. Okay. In other words, the wives told their husbands, if he asked her, how did it feel when we first had relations? She told him, it was a momentary discomfort, implying that they were aware and they had to prepare themselves physically, and okay, that was the case. All right, we go on now back to our Mishnah. Ha'ones noten miyad ha'mefater lekiyashotzi b'chui. The one who rapes her must pay immediately, and the seducer may let her go. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, Uklishayotzi, when he sends her out, Ishtohi, right? Does that mean she's his wife? Amar Abai says Abai, Ema l'kasher lo yichnos. It means when he refuses to marry her. Tanya nami hachi. And we have a Braita that teaches the same. Afal pi she'amru hamifateh noten l'kasher lo yichnos, boshet upagam. Even though we say that the one who seduces, okay, right, when he doesn't bring her into his household, in other words, when he doesn't marry her, still must pay boshet upagam, embarrassment and the flaw, degradation. Notain miyad, pays immediately. Okay? Ve'achad ha'ones ve'achad ha'mifateh. And the same applies to the rape, applies to the seduction. Bein hi uvein aviha yuchalin la'akev. Whether it's her or it's her father, they are able to, I'm going to explain la'akev as to object to it. In other words, they have the right to object to the marriage in those situations. Okay? Okay. Now the Gemara says, clarifying, bishlema mifuteh. That's understandable, or in the situation of the seduction. Because it's written, ima'en yima'en aviha. If it's refused, be refused by the father. Ein li ela aviha. The Torah cites the fact that the father has authority to refuse the marriage or turn down the marriage of his daughter if she was seduced. He atzma minayin, she herself, on what basis can we say that she can refuse in that situation? Talmud lomar, yima ein mikom makom. Okay, since the text uses double lashon, ma'ain yima'ain, it must be, and be refused must mean by another individual aside from the father, who's referred to in the pasuk. Therefore, mikom makom, in any situation. Okay. So the Gemara goes on, ela ones, but in regards to the rape, bishlema ihi kativ. That's understandable regarding to she herself. Why? Velo tiyeh. For him she will be mida'ata, from her own willingness. Okay? So Sid, that answers your question, right? Okay? But it applies, you're right, in the terms of the situation if she's a shota and she doesn't realize what happens. Okay?
How old is the shota?
No, shota means a woman who is not mentally competent. Okay? All right? Shota, mentally incompetent. Okay? So what happens?
Is it shelter male?
No, it could be a shota. It's shota. It's the same concept. Okay? Right? So the Gemara says, Ela aviha minalan. If we've said now in the rape, she has the right of refusal, okay, or to turn it down. On what basis can we say that could happen with the father? That the father should be able to have that authority too. Amar Abai says Abai as we go on. Shalo yehei choten iskar. So Abai's answers that the rapist shouldn't get any, so to speak, reward. All right? Rava doesn't like that answer. Rava says, Amar, kal v'chomer. There's a kal v'chomer here, a fortiori argument. Uma mifateh shelo avar ela al dat aviha bilvad. Whereas in the situation of seduction, the father is the one who I'm going to phrase it a little differently. Okay, the father is the one where he commits an act.
No.
The
rape, the seducer commits the act against the father because she wants it, but the father doesn't want it.
Okay, all right. We could phrase it that way. I was looking for another way of phrasing it. That's all. Okay, whereas in the act of seduction, what is committed is something negative to the father, okay? All right? Okay. Only to him, Bain he uvein aviha yuchalin la'akev. And we say in that situation that either her or the father can nullify, put off the wedding, okay? Onus, where it's the rape, she'avar al dat aviha ve'al dat atzma, where the transgression act is both against the father and against her, okay? Lo kol shekain, shouldn't it be all the more so that both her and the father have the right to nullify the possible wedding? Okay, so the Gemara then goes on. Notice, by the way, interesting language that the Gemara does not ask here, as we sometimes find in other places. Why doesn't Rava answer like Abaye, and why doesn't Abaye answer like Rava? That question is not presented here.
Well, actually, the Gemara isn't right now.
Okay, the Gemara just goes right ahead and gives a
The Gemara
straight
is doing it right now.
answer.
Right.
Okay, namely, it tells us Rava lo amar ka Abaye. Rava didn't answer like Abaye. Kevan dekam mishalem knas lav chote niskarhu. That Rava says he didn't answer like Abaye because by requiring that he pay the fine, the person who committed the act, okay, is not rewarded. Straight out. Abaye lo amar ki Rava. Abaye does not answer the way Rava did, namely, mefateh deihu matze ma'ake. Okay, that in the situation, okay, the seducer is able to put off the marriage. Avianami matze ma'ake. The father also can put off the marriage. Onus deihu lo matze ma'ake. In regards to the rape, where he is not able to put off the marriage, because remember we said it's a deoraisa element there. Aviha nami lo matze ma'ake. Maybe the father there also cannot put off the marriage. Tanya idach, and a Braita teaches, afal pisha amru onis noten miyad. Even though we say that in the situation of the rape, the rapist must pay immediately. Kasheyotzihu, okay, when he puts her out or divorces her, ein la'alav klum, then she has no claim against him. She has no claim for a ksuba. Kasheyotzi mi matzi mafikla, and when he puts her out, he divorces her. Do we find that he puts her out?
He's not allowed to.
After all, right? After all, the Torah says he has to marry her and keep her as his wife forever. Right? Ema, I would say, kashatetze he. That's when she goes out. Ein la alav klum. Then she has no claim against him for her ksuba. So we gather another to finish up. Mate, what if he dies? Okay. Yatsa kesef kansa b'ktubata. Then the money of the fine becomes the ketuba amount. Okay. Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda Omer, he says, yesh la ketuba mana. He claims that she should still get a ketuba of at least a minimum amount of a mana of 100. But my kamiflage, what are they arguing about? Rabbanan Savrei, the rabbis of the opinion, Ta'ama Mai Takinu Rabbanan Ketuba. The reasoning why the rabbis established the practice of a Ketuba, Kadei Shelo Tehei Kala Be'einav Lahotziyah. It's because it shouldn't be easy in his eyes to divorce her. Because he knows, okay, that he would have to pay up. Vahalo Matze Mafigle. And therefore he wouldn't come to put her out. Rabbi Yossi b'Rebbe Yehuda Savar, he's of the opinion, Hanami mitzar la ad amrahi lo ba'ina lach. It's possible that he could give her so much suffering that she would say, I don't even want to be with him anymore. And that would be the case, right? Now we'll go on just a tiny bit more. Onus, okay, shoteh ba'atzitzo. We said that the rapist would have to drink from this pot. Amar le Rava, says Rava, mi Parzika, from Parzika, the Ravashi. He said to Ravashi, Michte, since that's the case, Migmar Gamre Mehadade. Okay, maybe we should say that the fine of the rapist and the seducer are derived from one another. Okay, if that's the case, just to go over briefly, Laha Milta, okay, so to this same thing, in other words, marrying the woman against his will, Nami Ligmor Mehadadi, maybe we should learn that also from the case, from the two parallel. Okay, what happens in Markra, Moha Yimharena Lo Isha Lo Midaato. We say here that the amount of money that must be paid is similar to the dowry, only if he's so minded, okay, midato, based on his view, based on his opinion. And we'll stop right there. Tomorrow we'll finish this up, and then we can see we've got a few new Mishnayot, and Amud Beis is a lot more. All right, everybody have a good day today, and everybody stay well.